Hi, I'm Jacci Pillar, and this is Talk-ist, and we're at that time where we do nerd wars, where I try and out-nerd our guest, and our guest is the nerdiest nerd of all things Doctor Who, Vanessa de Kauwe from Australian National University Science Alliance. Welcome again, Vanessa.
Nerd pride.
We're going to nerd out via my Google skills, which are not great. But we all know Google's not a really reputable source of information, perhaps, but not really that reputable. But we'll get there. So, topic today is Doctor Who, and this Nerd Royals is where I try and out nerd Vanessa's expertise. So, the first thing I came up with in my Googling was that Doctor Who really had a central concept that was based on the notion of disability of sorts, because the first Doctor Who was William Hartnell, and there was something interesting about where he took the show. Can you enlighten us on that?
Yeah, look, the first Doctor, we're always very grateful. We love him and all that. And towards the end, neurodiversity, intellectual disability, together with just degeneration, was taking him. And so they didn't know what we were going to do. He wasn't dying. He was just not really capable of staying with the scripts and so forth. So what happens? We have regeneration. We get the thing that was letting him down, clearly, was his body. So we gave him another one.
And what's really good about this was it was just incorporated into the show, and this was in the 60s. So, we talk about ableism and how a lot of people don't get opportunities because of their chronic illness and a disability, but this was in the 60s. So there was obviously this desire from that particular production team to make the show accessible and incorporate the realities of life into the show. So that's pretty cool.
Look, when you have a look at that production team, Doctor Who is only common culture now. It was niche all the way through to, I'm going to say, the 80s, because it was just a certain sort of people, maybe neurodiverse like us. But that first production crew was Verity Lambert, a Jewish woman at the BBC, definitely the only one, and Hassan, who was a gay brown man, again at the BBC. So it was people who were used to being on the outer, just took it for granted. Okay, what are we dealing with now? Neurodiversity? Okay, regenerate him. Wonderful.
It is pretty cool, and it's why it's such a respected series. So the other thing was that in terms of gender diversity was the Doctor didn't become the Time Lord until 1969, and the show had started in 1963. So there's a few undercurrents of gender diversity in this show all the way through.
As we know now, that the reason why the Doctor was never a Time Lord is because they are the parent or the progenitor of all of those so-called Time Lords. They're not really a he, but a they. And recently we had we call it the first female Doctor, Jodie Whittaker. But as the show's gone on, we've now got information that the Doctor was a she in the first place. So the question isn't why do we have a female Doctor now? The question was, why was he male for 5 minutes? 50 years is nothing when you consider the 12,000 years that they've been alive. So, interesting.
My favourite Doctor Who is the legendary Tom Baker, known for his scarf, and there was an air I felt about him of a certain, let's use the word flamboyance, but I also felt like he walked a bit of a gender edge, which made me quite comfortable with him. And so I believe there's a rumour that he was championing of gender diversity right back in sort of, was 74 to 81 was his tenure?
Yeah, he lasted quite some time, but the bigger thing was when he was about to go, he was very flamboyant. I think even people who don't know Doctor Who know about the scarf and about the TARDIS. And when people were ready for him to regenerate, the news and the popular media of the time were asking, well, who's taking your place? And he was giving out clues that it was a particular woman that would be replacing him. So he was right into it at the time. It didn't happen, but that's not his doing.
So there was so much to love about Tom Baker, and there's more to love about Tom Baker as far as I'm concerned. As he flipped his scarf, it was like flipping to society and saying, you know, we're going to honour this original character that was originally female. So I didn't know that. Can you talk me through that a bit more?
Look, we didn't know until just recently. We got a new doctor just presented. We weren't even told about it. That people are calling the Ruth Doctor or Ruthless, and she seems to be the original Time Lord, as it were, the person who could the original person who could regenerate. And you can see why that person went on to be called the Doctor. Because she can heal anyone by just changing their body. Right? So Ruth Doctor is someone who looks like me as well, which is interesting. So she's a bit rounder, she's much darker, she's a bit older as well, and God, I love that sort of gear.
It's so cool because, you know, like I said, I've been reading this stuff about intersectional arts curation. And, you know, screen dance in the United States has been sort of forging the way a bit with this. But obviously the BBC have a long history of trying to be more diverse. It's nice to think that Doctor Who was ahead of the time in the 60s and the 70s, because even for me, being in a science and technology and engineering field in the Air Force in the 80s, we talk about how gender was treated then. I didn't have access to a toilet, and I remember that film, Hidden Figures, with the NASA crews running to the toilet. That's literally what it was like for me in the 80s. So I you know, we did hang on to things like Doctor Who.
Even now, that was the 80s, and that was more than 30 years ago. Even now, we still have toilets that are male, female, and disability, rather than just ambulant and mobility toilets. Come on, everyone. Grow up.
I reckon. I mean, what have we got at home? We don't have, you know, way more toilets than we need at home. We just all get in there and do what we got to do and get on our way. I sincerely hope intersectional curation continues along the path of the great Tom Baker and William Hartner and all of that team you mentioned earlier. So thank you so much for being on Nerd Whirlers. We've learned a lot about the gender diversity and disability diversity of Doctor Who.